Hey, Adria, thank you for coming in. You are really the most amazing, impact, wonderful person in the entire world. And I recommend my entire audience, they got to support everything you do because you are, the epitome of contribution and impact and influence, but also everything you do is about goodness and positivity and making the world better. So really, audience support, audience. So thank you for coming in and sharing everything and your experience with my audience.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I'm excited to share today and yeah, absolutely. Thank you for honoring me and having me here. So
So, Audrey, you have this wonderful contribution you're making, and it's at an unprecedented scale. Nobody is doing what you're doing in terms of building impact, building community, building purpose. And now you're scaling it also with zero AI, and we'll get into that towards the kind of the middle portion of this interview. But it's such a wonderful arc, and it's continuing, right? And
yeah.
what you're doing to the world. But I want to know about what were those inflection points that created this wonderful Audria? And it could have been when you were 3 or 5 years old. It could have been when you're, 19 or in your 20s or something like that. Could have been jobs you had. Could have been inside, outside the family. Could be mentors. What are those three defining moments that made this amazing, outstanding Audria?
Well, I mean, it's complex, right? Because we're an amalgamation of all of our experiences. I think all of us are a bit of a mosaic. So every little thing that we do kind of builds upon our personalities. But I mean, I grew up in Wisconsin. I definitely didn't grow up with very much. Like as a child, I think my mom made a joke one morning when we were having cereal before breakfast. She was reading the newspaper and she said, "Oh, it looks like we're 10% below the poverty line, technically." But at the time when you're a kid, you don't understand anything about money or, stuff. Um, you just know love, right? So I had a lot of love from my mom. Um, and my dad sadly passed away. And so she raised me as a single mom, and then at some point I started to dream. I had this idea in my head that I used to watch like the Travel Channel, I guess, as a kid. So I used to always have this fantasy that I would live abroad or I would travel and go to all these amazing places and see all these things that we only dreamed about in Wisconsin because there's really not much to do there. And yeah, and then I guess that was probably the beginning of it, of me wanting to reach out. I took my first trip to Spain when I was 18 years old. I saved, I think it was like at the time $800, which felt like a fortune, and my flight was like $300. Back then, it was a lot cheaper to fly. This is like, I don't even know, 25 years ago. So, and I went by myself, and I went to Madrid and I went to Granada, and I even ended up going all the way down by myself to Morocco at that age, if you can imagine. But that I was hooked at that point, and traveling and learning about cultures and people. And every penny that I got from that time forward, I would save it to try to go to new places or experience that feeling. It was exhilarating. So anyway, maybe that's a bit of it.
So you had this early sort of inflection point where you're challenged in terms of means, right? Financial, and you dreamed about traveling and exploring,
Yeah.
and that led to when you had the opportunity to do travel, you traveled a lot and
Yeah.
understand other people's experiences and culture. It'll give you a diverse perspective as well, and to respect um, diversity and its abundance
Yeah.
out there. So as you went through this phase of traveling and things like that, from a professional standpoint, what were the kind of the next steps in your story arc?
Yeah, so I eventually I went to school for journalism, but I was interested in human stories and storytelling. but it's quite depressing. I'm sorry to any journalists that are listening to this because a lot of my teachers, they actually worked on Watergate, or like I had a teacher that actually got breast cancer because she was an investigative reporter and was investigating toxic waste that was being dumped next to a school. So it is really, it's a tough job. And I remember thinking that I was like, I don't know if I can live in people's pain every day like that. It was a lot. So I decided to go into finance instead, which is dry. I took a job at the Chicago Board of Trade, and then I fell in love with math and markets, which is very different than the creativity of journalism. And then that ended up being my career pretty much most of my life. And I loved it. Went on to, well, the travel bug hit me again. And then when the financial crisis happened in '08, I moved by myself to Singapore and with two suitcases and my dog. I didn't know anyone in the country. And then I took a job, originally working for a trading group, and then eventually I ended up working in Coots Bank, doing private wealth management, and loved that, and stayed in the region subsequently for 10 years. But during that period is when I really started to become more interested in philanthropy and impact. Growing up 10% below the poverty line in the United States is a walk in the park compared to growing up below the poverty line in Indonesia or Thailand. There was one particular moment I think that struck me the most was I remember being in Bangkok and walking across this bridge, and there was this woman there, and she had clearly been in a very bad fire. And she had a child next to her, and her hands had melted off from the fire, and she was holding the cup between her hands that she could bear, her mangled fingers trying to hold the cup to ask for money. And that really hit me, in terms of wanting to do more beyond just like my professional career and just doing the 9 to 5 thing. And that was probably a heavy moment, but it was a moment where I decided that I wanted to get more involved, and like, what do I actually do to help someone like that? And so that's when I started pretty heavily volunteering and going on more of a philanthropic journey, I guess, as opposed to, it's great and everything to have a career, but it's a selfish motivation, right? And so at that point, my wheel turned forward and I started thinking about others as opposed to like my own achievements, but like, how could I actually use what I've been blessed with to try to help other people? Which was an acorn of an idea that kind of grew and grew and grew from that day. So anyway.
So you have this interest in journalism because it's about people, right? And
Yeah.
but you found that there's this coverage of really maybe people in pain, and you're empathic, so that would influence, and you would feel those kinds of emotions, and people putting themselves in jeopardy, and
Yeah.
now you thought, you know what, maybe that's not for me, and you decided, you know what, but finance is an area that was attractive to you, and there's math aspects of it, and you ended up in the finance area. And then you got into private wealth management, and you were in Singapore a number of years, and you were able to experience different cultures, right? Asian culture.
Yeah.
You also were still traveling, and you could see people um, really undergoing hardships. And again, the empath side of you sort of continued to flower, right? And, and
Mhm.
and you decided to then embrace more and more of that. So at what point did you say, you know what, I'm going to leave wealth management and finance, and I'm just going to devote my time into the impact space?
Um, so it was a journey, but if fast forward in time, I eventually came back to the United States, and it was like 2 years before the pandemic happened. At that point, I took a job working for Morgan Stanley, so finance again. and was doing well. They had shifted me to Miami. And at that point, I had no idea. Like, if you would have told me back then what I'd be doing now, I'd think you're crazy, probably. Because there was the path just didn't, never in a million years did I think I'd be doing this. But well, so it started with a small idea. I took a trip to New York City. I was kind of frustrated during that trip because at that time it felt like every meeting I had, it was kind of quid pro quo. It was very transactional. I was like, I'll do this if you do this, or if you can't give me your connections, then then this meeting is not important to me. So I remember feeling very empty, and I just went back to Miami. I sat on my sofa and I kind of slumped down on the sofa and I said, you know what? I said, I'm just going to give my contacts away. I said, if it's so important to everyone, I'm going to give it to them. And I want people to know who I know. And so it wasn't private banking, it became public banking, I guess, because I said, I worked my whole life for these connections, but I want to hold on to them. So what I did was I created a WhatsApp group of everyone that I collected over the years that was wealthy enough to give back. And then I asked them, I said, look, I'm going to connect all of you guys. Please don't do a bunch of deals on here. I'll get fired at Morgan Stanley. But I'm asking you to do philanthropy and to connect each other without letting the left hand know what the right hand is doing. Just help, right? So it was birthed out of a moment of kind of frustration, maybe slight sarcasm, because I was feeling a bit empty that day. But I promised myself that I would try to live a life where I give without expectation and I would just surrender to giving. And so I didn't know that 2 weeks later the pandemic would happen. Nobody had a crystal ball or knew that that would happen. And then this little WhatsApp group, it ended up raising millions of dollars for charity during the pandemic. I was getting 20 referrals a day. I always joke that people usually run away from bankers and attorneys, and at that time I was running away from everyone because I was getting so many referrals. It was crazy. But because I worked at a bank, I was able to, do OFAC and Interpol checks on people. And we were doing webinars with presidents of countries. And I was just doing it as a volunteer through my Gmail, but they would ask me questions like, um, do you think we should leave the airports open? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not qualified to answer that question. Or I even remember the hydroxychloroquine thing with Trump. It actually came from my WhatsApp group. Whereas we had a doctor from Oklahoma, from the university there, who had working on all types of diseases, but specifically had a background in malaria and creating potential cures for malaria. And we had him on a webinar with the government of Honduras. And he was the one that suggested hydroxychloroquine at the very beginning. And then we saw on the news later that the president of Honduras had talked to Donald Trump and had recommended hydroxychloroquine. So I don't even know if he knows that, but that actually came from the WhatsApp group from us. It was our fault. But there was another client of mine in South Africa who his son he was patient zero in South Africa. He was potentially dying. And they didn't know what to do. And so some of these doctors that were in our WhatsApp groups that were doing the webinars with us, they would call him and, they themselves had COVID. So they were giving themselves cocktails of drugs and trying to figure out what worked. And in essence, what happened is that we ended up saving his life by helping give advice at a time where. So in summary, what I had learned from this exercise was that making connections is not about making money. Sometimes it's as pivotal as saving lives, and that humanity doesn't trust each other very much. So we make introductions to each other to try to leverage trust between one another. And in a time of crisis where there's absolute chaos, like the pandemic, which was unprecedented, millions of people died by the simple fact that we don't have a method by which we can connect each other in a trusted way quickly. And so that's when I started thinking about artificial intelligence in 2020. and how to use AI to build bridges of trust between humanity, and how we can understand more subtle things about us that maybe a typical robot couldn't pick up, but like empathy, giving, cooperation. And I started thinking about the importance of communities and why that is so important, and why we need smaller safe spaces to connect, and why I felt that traditional social media has been failing us, because it's a one bucket model. If you put all of us together in a bucket, it's chaos. So you need to break it down into smaller, this is my math side, but you need to break it down into smaller buckets and allow people a place where they feel safe, like little animals, like my dog, Caesar, he likes to go into his little cage, right? Feels safe in there. But we're not that much different. So I was very, I think the pandemic changed a lot of things for a lot of people. I think it broke certain conceptions, and it changed the way businesses run or the way that we think about things. But for me, I told myself, I said at that time, the way that I can give back is I want to create systems that build bridges for humanity so that we can understand one another. And I think that if we can do that, we can solve everything else. We can solve climate change, or we can solve social division and conflict. We can solve like clean water. All of the problems that we have stem from the fact that we don't know how to find each other. Or maybe somebody has the introduction of the connection that could help solve that issue, but they're not willing to give it because they don't trust you enough. That sucks. The solution's right there, but it's not coming to you. So how do we fix that? So we got to fix ourselves. We have to fix the way that we communicate with each other. And I feel like AI can be the buffers between us, to help us come together more closely. I'm very passionate about AI because of this. It's not just be so much brighter if we use technology um, to help us communicate with one another better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
So you're at Morgan Stanley, and you're still in wealth management,
mm,
but you realize that there's a sort of transactional nature, and you thought, you know what, I'm going to break that mold. I'm just going to just serve by connecting people who have common interests and
yeah,
things, and you found that just by serving and really looking for any kind of connection for good, for positivity, to work on a community, solving problems, but in a trusted environment, then this accelerates and it builds a sense of purpose and as you mentioned, it's a kind of a trust is sort of woven as connective tissue through these things. And you thought that WhatsApp
yeah,
was a way of doing that. And then you realize that what I'm hearing is that AI could be such an important element of how, bringing people together, and I guess that's been the journey of zero AI. So can you can you
yeah,
can you describe that journey into a zero AI? So you have these groups, you
yeah,
have people who are working with each other, or something. Somebody will say, you know what, I got a particular situation. Is there anybody here who has the capability to positively impact this area?
yeah,
And then you realize that for a number of years that AI could be this enabler and this trusted
yeah.
environment. So can you describe that transition and then building the team and what
Sure.
this platform looks like?
So originally I started building AI for like my own company, right? It was to service the Vine, which is the name of the community that I founded. So I essentially became a community builder myself. I didn't even know that I was that label. I was just doing the work. And then we've made thousands of introductions in the Vine, but the Vine is if communities are like snowflakes and they're all different and they all have different shapes and sizes and whatever, the vine is my snowflake, and it has its own rules, its own mission, rituals, things that make it unique, to its own self. But in essence, the idea of the vine was birthed from the same thing that happened to me on my sofa, which was I wanted people to give back, um, in different ways. So it's not just monetary. Like you give your connections, you give your time. Kindness, is a form of giving. People don't think about that, but if you smile at the guy at the grocery store, like that's important. Offer your energy to them. So I talk a lot about that in the community, and then it broke into many different types of subgroups of, family offices, governments, and non-for-profits is mostly what it was. And we decided to be a bridge for philanthropic causes, so to help the families or governments help the charities that are the boots on the ground that are doing the hard work. How do we lighten the load for them, but also encourage the charities to not hold on to those connections? How do they help their connections? Also, you can also give back in that ecosystem because you don't want to be a one-way street, because some charities can be takers too. They don't realize they're doing it. Maybe they're not treating their volunteers well. Maybe they're not treating their donors well. Give back to those people. So that's what it was about. And then as I started going on this journey, funny story, I ended up losing the trademark for Vine AI to a group of attorneys.
Mm.
And I was really upset. I think I cried about it because I really liked the name. I took a walk and then I came back and I got home. I sat on that same sofa in Miami, and I was just looking at my bookshelf, and this book like stuck out. It had an orange spine on it, and I hadn't picked it off the shelf since college. And it said zero on the side. And I pulled the book out, and it was like I opened it up, and I opened it up to a page that said, "Be strong in the face of adversity." I had written a note to myself 20 years before, and I was reading it in that moment. And I decided in that moment to name the new company, because I had to call back the attorney and say, okay, what are we going to get for a trademark now? Because we just lost the name of what you're trying to do. And I was started reading about zero and what it means, and said it's the neutral point between a positive and a negative. And I started thinking about societies and how they're always imbalanced one way or the other, and how AI could be this neutral space for us. And I was like, this is brilliant. I was like, then I started to feel happy that I was like, I better make sure I register this. So I messaged the attorney. I said, can you register OAI and ZEROAI both? Just because O looks like zero, right? He said, oh, it's available. Great. So registered it. At the time, I didn't know what OpenAI is. Never heard of it. ChatGPT hadn't come out yet. And as it turns out, I ended up getting the trademark for OAI or OpenAI 2 weeks before Sam Altman did in the United States.
Yeah.
And had I not lost my trademark that day, that would have never happened. But I felt like it was like a divine thing. It was kind of like a God wink, saying like, you're on the right path. Keep going. And by the way, your philosophy of giving, you're not building this for yourself. You're building it for other communities too. So that was the big shift where I realized that I was like, I'm not just going to be one of those people, the technological oligarch on the top of a thing, deciding what everybody does and all their rules and everything. And I think I mentioned this to you before, Stephen, but I spent like last summer living in Greece. And that really, like, I read this book called Parallel Lives by Plutarch, which really got me thinking about ancient systems of government and how back in the day they had this system called the Agora, where all these communities, different types, whether they were trade or religious or, could be anything, agriculture, anything that came together in their kind of town square, if you will. They were allowed to have their own rituals, their own customs, their own rules, their own structures, and they were sovereign. The government allowed this back then. And I started thinking like, I could do this too. I could create systems where communities could just use the software as a B2B SaaS thing, and it would allow them to use the AI where I wouldn't dictate what are the standards or what are the mission or what are the values of that community, but just to be the tool or the fabric or the framework behind it. So that's what I became very passionate now instead of just being a community builder, running my own individual people to, but being a person that was very passionate. Like I would say, like, if you make shoes by hand and you're a cobbler, right? Like I made the shoes by hand. Literally, I did it brick by brick or shoelace or whatever, string by string. And now I'm learned a lot in that process and want to use that skill set to help other people. So,
And and so when you encapsulate your vision and your community building and your passion for positivity and doing good, and you're interweaving AI through all of it, then you have to reach out and find an AI team to start building this. How did that come about?
well, the first thing I did whenever I have an idea is I write it down. So I essentially, like, this was back in 2021. I wrote a white paper on it on human connection, and I started trying to see if I could create some sort of a formula around what I'm doing because I have a math background. So I was like, okay, how do everything, whether you're a dentist, whether you're air traffic control, whether you're an engineer, whatever job you have to have a process. And you have to be able to write that process down and clearly articulate that process to another human being. If they can take that process and duplicate it, you have a product, right? So I said, is there a product? Is there a process? Is there something unique about what I'm doing in human connection? So I wrote a white paper on it. I brought it to MIT and I started kind of banding it around different professors until I met my co-founder, Leon. And he said, and Leon's Polish and he's very serious. Um, and, he's got a peculiar personality, but he's very direct. He'll tell you if he thinks it's BS or not, kind of person. And he won't waste his time. And he said, Adria, he's like, in his thick accent, he's like, this has legs. He's like, I'm very interested to pursue this with you. And so that was my first partner. So he's got a PhD in AI. He was teaching data scraping at MIT at the time. And then I found my second co-founder, Chris Adams. More recently, he was introduced through a friend that I was working for my company, and he has built 25 SaaS apps in his career. And as a coincidence, he had also built his own online communities himself, like on the side for fun. So he built up like a community on LinkedIn, for example, and he had other communities that he had done. And so he knew exactly what I was trying to do. So the three of us teamed up and then we've, have been everything's been going really well and the Vine community has supported the app. So they're the first we call it the alpha test of the algorithm, and then the beta will come because we ended up finding other communities that were other ecosystems inside of the Vine. So these are chambers of commerce, governments, non-for-profits that are ecosystems or their own unique communities that have agreed to use the software. And so now we've got 4 million of those individuals interested to beta. And then the next step after that is we want to pilot it with countries. So we have a couple countries interested as well. So that will come next year. Yeah.
That's a really ambitious program with great vision and passion behind it. And um, you got sort of the alpha going, and you're going to release the beta later this year, probably what, October or something like that.
Yeah.
And,
Exactly. Yeah.
and then you'll get the feedback, and you'll continue to iterate the program, and then you could do a full launch. And that's a
Yeah.
remarkable vision that you're encapsulating in all of this. And have you brought in more people into that into your sort of inner circle there?
In terms of like to the beta or
Or in leadership, for example, I'm thinking Paul. So,
oh yeah, I mean right now we have a couple other people that are joining us. So we have my friend Lucas who has joined as head of government relations. So he's worked in risk management with governments for 20 years.
right,
So he's going to help us because we're B2B SaaS, right? So we're really focusing on later on getting government contracts to help with like building communities within smart cities or free trade zones or helping chambers of commerce, helping events. Like if like Dubai, for example, they have a lot of events, so they could use the AI to help build trust at like GITEX, for example. So really just focusing on that for now. But I think sky's the limit in terms of where we could take it. But it's really focused on private communities because that's the key. I think initially anybody can set up a community on LinkedIn, but it starts, you know, who is the person behind it? And so originally there's not going to be a whole lot of trust established, whereas opposed to if there's an organization behind it, like a chamber or something, there's some sort of vetting already that happens to be a part of that ecosystem. And then we just want to magnify everything that they're doing, take the weight off them, so the heavy lifting, so the AI does the introductions for them. Like they told us at GITEX, for example, they do like 45,000 manual introductions over 5 days.
that's true.
And I said, how would you like to not do that? That sounds like hell.
Yeah.
So yeah, in essence, the AI can take away a lot of that intense labor, but it's also going to do a lot better job than we can because it will provide the metrics and help us to understand how did that introduction go? How did it work out? Did they end up piloting that project or did they end up going golfing together? You wouldn't know, right? But I think this data is interesting. And anybody that runs an organization, technically you are a community builder. If you're a CEO of a company, yes, it is a community that you're running. Don't be disillusioned. So if you want people to work, if you want your widgets to sell more, or you want your products to be more successful in the market, it starts with human connection first. How well are your employees connecting?
Yeah, and just to give a little bit of context for the audience on GITEX, they are the world's largest innovation investment technology conference series. Their audience reach this year, I think, or participation would be a 370,000 and 40% are C-level. So it's a great
Yeah.
opportunity between yourself and the solution you offer, and then all of the manual labor that they do in managing these conferences. So there'll be other ones like Seamless, which also operates in Saudi and in UAE. So they'd be a natural.
Yeah.
There's the Arab Health Conference, which is WHX Tech. They'd be another one just out of the GCC region. I'm just kind of thinking, I mean, IEEE and ACM, we run over 2,000 conferences a year, and maybe that could be a possibility as well. I'm just kind of thinking live. There's a World
Yeah.
Technology Services Alliance, same thing. So they're
So
just
many clients. It's endless. It's endless opportunities for what we could use the software for. I've even every day we talk to a chef, for example,
right.
and he's got so much stuff everywhere. He's got cookbooks, he's got his TikTok, he's got this and that, he's got his events. And so we were talking to him about how we could it's like putting a neural network on top of his ecosystem.
Mm.
It's, to ask questions to an AI about yourself and your network that is personalized AI, right? I think that's the future. An AI that understands you, but also has your best interest at heart. And what helps a human being? accelerate through life is human connection. You need some sort of a system that can help you meet the right people at the right time, build meaningful relationships, but you need the agora to do that. And that has to be in partnership with governments from the top down. And then if you do that, then you can get all the smaller communities on board too.
Yeah, I mean, you spent 10 years in Singapore. Singapore would be perfect for what you're trying to do because they're so advanced in their thinking, almost like what UAE is doing, very advanced. So
Yeah.
they would appreciate the genius of your vision and you're now implementing it. So, I mean, the possibilities that you indicated are endless, right? So, I mean, every country should be using
Mhm.
these technologies. I just had a meeting with the people behind Equity Bank, right? And I had an earlier meeting to, but they should be using your tech. And I think you met them earlier, and if not, then definitely they should be part of your vision because they're trying to um, create connectivity within all of Africa, and they've got a lot of financing behind it. And what your vision enables will allow them to accelerate what they're doing and do it in a safe and trusted way, which is the basis of your
Yeah.
vision. Yet you could have these subclusters or sub-communities within the broader community. All of your tech allows that. Uh,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's just
It's
amazing.
tailored. I mean, it's consultative. We can tailor the software to their needs depending on what they want to do. There is an idea that once we have a lot of communities on board, it could create a network effect.
Yeah,
Whereas, like, on like WhatsApp, you can turn on your scene, so like other people can see if you're online or not online. So
right.
it's the same thing with the communities in our software. You can make your communities online and visible to other people, and the AI could help, invite people from those other communities to your community. So it's a double-edged sword. So you can make it private, yes, if you want to, and shut it off so that your community can only see, if your members can only see your community. But there is benefits to having the network effect too, which will come into play much later.
So I have a question then. I mean, this interview will go out globally, and then I'll point to it in my keynotes and things like that. Let's say a country or a very large community wants to get in touch with you. What's the best way to do that? Or who should they be contacting, or should they be tagging you on LinkedIn, where they say, you know what, I really want to explore this further. What's the best way? And the timing, perhaps maybe next year or even this year.
I think for right now, we're kind of full with the beta. We have a lot on our hands.
Right.
But we are looking to take on up to 4 countries next year for pilots. So let's say, for example, I just give a random example. Let's just say that you're Norway and you really want to build bridges with Dubai, for example. Then we could do a pilot program with maybe the chambers of commerce and help cross-pollinate those relationships. Maybe you want to focus on, maybe it's shipping. Norway is a big shipping place, and you want to introduce people at the ground level so that they start building relationships to help the shipping industry. I have no idea. But let's just, as an example, our software would be able to track that and we be able to provide data and metrics on how well those human connections are going. What was the output of it? But it all starts at the community level. So you have to pick an organization. You can't just have I don't believe in open bucket connecting. It has to be a specific focus. If they don't know what it is, then we could work with, one of the ministers, maybe the minister of economy would be good, and just kind of help them understand like what are they what what are they doing to grow GDP growth? How are they growing? And what industries are succeeding and what industries are not doing so well and why. So we'd have a conversation with them and then you just put together a plan to help them succeed. So I think AI can do that. Um, so anyway, that's where we're at. If they want to contact me, they can contact me through the Vine. We have a website. It's www.thevine.earth, or they can email me at adria@thevine.earth. I'm happy to chat with anyone that's interested in talking about human connection and AI.
Adria, you just gave out your email. I mean, that's
They can
pretty
email me.
out there. You sure you
Well, we
don't
do get up
edit
to
that
like, I've
out?
gotten thousands of introductions, so I'm kind of fine.
Okay. I mean, you're just such a wonderful person in what you're doing, and I really believe that this is just going to make the world better, and people will engage and they'll support it, and you'll be up for a Nobel Prize in peace.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I I get it. I know what you're doing, and I definitely will encourage everybody to support you. So what's the ideal case then? So you're scaling this thing, you're in the beta, you got 4 million beta users already kind of lined up, and then you can take on more countries next year. Okay, now let's progress that
Yeah.
5 years. What is that going to look like? The entire world is enabled, right? And you've got 300 million people in it or something like that, right? Or what is it going to look like?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Now we're talking a little bit sci-fi at this point, but they always say, right, was it Stephen Covey that says begin with the end in mind? The
Yeah,
seven habits of highly successful people. So in the end, whether I think AIs will be numerous. There'll
yeah,
be competition in the market. There'll be other people that have similar apps or software to us. Of course, it's natural. But I think that the AIs that will be the most successful will be the ones that have focused on building the most trust with the public.
yeah,
And where those AI agents are deeply focused on serving the human, understanding their needs, and achieving their objectives around human connection. And I think that um, in the future, every child that is born will be given an AI agent that will carry that child through life. It will keep track of everything you do from how much you exercise. Maybe that's a partnership with an Apple Watch, who knows? To what is your eating schedule, to but the things that I'm focused on with my AI agents is keeping track of your network, because all of our connections are a mess right now. Every single person's network is a mess. I've talked to countless governments, world leaders, celebrities, billionaires, to the Joe Schmo, whoever. We none of us have. There's no. All the tools that we have are over complex. It's too complicated. It's got too many buttons. It requires too much labor. You need to put the heavy lifting back onto the AI agent. It starts with having the AI agent focus on the individual. And so if we can do that well, then I'd like to throw my hat in the ring for AI agents. As Bill Gates says, that whoever wins this game wins them all. So I am throwing my hat in the ring, not to say that I'm going to win it, but I mean, if you don't try, then you don't succeed. So I want to try to create an AI agent that humanity trusts, and that they will be able to use throughout their lives and be safe enough to give it to their children one day. So
So in your AI then, because you got Leon, who I met, and I was at Mosaic with him as well. So he's an amazing, talented, and Chris and your team are like world class, right? So
yeah,
um, and you're developing novel capabilities as well, right? Are you applying for patents and things like that, or?
yeah, yeah. So the first one was my own patent. Um, and that one was focused on my process by which I connected people in my own community. The second patent I'm working on with Leon and stealth mode right now, so we're co-authoring that one together. So as we go, we'll continue to um, create more and more patents around the ideas that we have, um, and I'm sure that we'll be learning a lot as we go as well. I mean, we all do. So
So this is the final series of questions. And are there any areas that we haven't covered yet that you want to bring to the attention of my audience? So that's one question. And I'll pause there, and then I'll have another question after that.
I just want to close by saying that a concept that I came up with pretty early on, which is what I call the wheel of giving, which is this idea of if you think of like a water wheel, like those old-fashioned wheels that you've seen in rivers. If you think about it spinning forward, which is the energy or the action of giving, right? So for those who are religious, God spoke the world into existence, right? It created a vibration or frequency, which is still reverberating today, right? So action, everything we do is we're creating action from the present moment and it dictates the future. So if the action or the energy that you're putting out is altruistic, positive, um, not necessarily self-focused all the time, like ego or vanity, it does come back to you. I feel like this is like, you know, I've seen it time and time again. The more that you surrender or you let go, it comes back. And the more that you take or that you hold on when the wheel spins backwards, you'll be like a hamster in a wheel and everything kind of spins away from you. So this is my main core philosophy on life is that giving and taking is like breathing. It's important to receive as well, but it is important to let go of, I call it the want machine in your head. You wake up in the morning and you just hear want, 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 want all day long. I have a lot of people that come to me and want a lot of things. And I always say to them, what are you willing to give? As opposed to wanting all the time, which also creates a lot of unhappiness. So anyway, that's my big thing um, that I always like to share with people.
That's a wonderful philosophy, and it's one that people can implement, right? Make it part of their personal narrative every day, and that is to have that water wheel going forward, right? And
Yeah.
enabling abundance and giving and service, and then ultimately it has a flywheel effect as well, right? It just kind of
Yeah.
gathers momentum.
Yeah.
So then the final question is, are there other recommendations you'd like to give the audience, or a question that you want to, or a series of questions you want to pose to the audience that they can ponder?
Um, I would just say that, yeah, I mean, it's just right back to the root of what I'm saying is that I would challenge everyone to take a moment to ask themselves, like, what is your real purpose here? Not necessarily vocational, because I think, um, we attribute our purpose to like having kids or to, um, being a doctor or whatever it is, but it's something much deeper than that, I feel. There's like a soul calling that brings us here, a deeper why. But I think that can only be found in stillness. So that's interesting. So I think that maybe I'd leave people with that to question like what is that to you? Um,
Yeah, that's a really profound
I
thought.
think I know mine now. I think I know why I'm here now. But I mean, it becomes revealed to you over time. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of invokes this idea of a universal truth that sort of weaves everywhere. And if you can tap into that and finding your truth, that
Mhm.
makes the world better. You know, Adria, I really enjoyed this time with you. You're brilliant, you're soulful, you're talented, you're thoughtful, and you definitely are moving the world forward and that water you're going forward and you evoke passion in people to do better. So you made me better today than listening and working,
Um,
doing this
Thank
interview.
you.
So thank you for taking the time, Adi. And your schedule is crazy. So thank you for taking the time to do this interview.
Yeah, I did 19 countries last year, and I'm already at 8 this year, and I'm tacking on another 4 in June. So it is a lot, but I mean, it's my dream that I had when I was a child, right? Like I really love culture and I love people, And the best way is just to go out and meet them and see them, spend time, look at the way that they, you know, what do they do on the weekends, or what types of food do they eat, or like, to live like them. I'm obsessed with that idea, so that like I feel like I want to travel to every country in the world before I die, but we'll see.
Yeah,
Anyway,
we can even get into
well, thank you,
that.
Stephen.
So thank you so much, and
Thank you.
please stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.